The morning sun slipped through the tall glass windows of the luxury apartment, lighting up a room filled with soft carpets, quiet furniture, and the smell of fresh coffee. He stood near the window, looking down at the busy streets below. Cars moved like tiny dots, and people hurried like ants. He had worked for years to reach this height, and the world now looked small from where he stood. He wasn't born rich. He remembered the tiny rented room, thin walls, and nights when he went to bed with dreams louder than his stomach. He studied late, worked 2 jobs, and built something from nothing. Step by step, he climbed higher until people started using words like successful and millionaire when talking about him. Then she came into his life. She didn't care about how much money he had or how big his dreams were. She listened when he talked. She laughed at his dumb jokes. She made him feel like a normal human, not a machine running after wealth. They met by chance at a small bookstore. She was looking for a used novel, and he was trying to find a quiet place to escape his stress for a few minutes. They both reached for the same book and smiled. At first it was simple. Coffee talks turned into long walks. Long walks turned into late-night phone calls. She never asked him about his bank account or business plans. She only asked how his day was and whether he was eating well. That was new to him. For years, people had talked to him only about money, deals, or what he could give them. With her, he felt safe. He felt seen. Their relationship grew quietly, naturally. There were no big shows or loud promises, just comfort, trust, and small happiness moments. He liked how she hummed songs while cooking. He liked how she talked to stray cats on the street. He liked how she believed that life wasn't only about money. One evening, while sitting in a quiet park, he took out a small box from his pocket. His hands trembled a little. He had negotiated million-dollar contracts without fear. But this moment made his heart beat faster than ever. When she opened the box and saw the ring, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't shout or jump. She simply nodded and whispered, "Yes." They sat there in silence for a long time, holding hands, watching the sky slowly turn orange. After that day, their world changed. They started talking about small things where they might live, what kind of home they wanted, what curtains they liked. She talked about a small kitchen with sunlight. He talked about a quiet neighborhood where no one would bother them, but outside their small world, reality was very different. His life was heavy with pressure. Investors watched his every move. Family members talked non-stop about reputation, social class, and standards. To them, love was a business deal. Marriage was a strategy, not a feeling. They didn't like her. They said she came from a simple background. They said she didn't match their level. They warned him that marriage could damage his image in his future partnerships. At first, he defended her. He argued. He said love mattered. He said she wasn't trying to use him, but the pressure did not stop. Calls from business partners. Cold comments from relatives. Silent disapproval during family dinners. People started planting doubts in his mind, slowly and carefully. Are you ready to lose everything you built? Are you sure she isn't with you for the lifestyle? What if she becomes a weakness? Those words stayed in his head long after the conversations ended. Then one evening, everything changed. She asked to meet him at their usual quiet cafe. Her face looked nervous, but her eyes were soft. She played with the edge of her cup before speaking. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. He smiled, trying to make things light. "You're making it sound serious." She took a slow breath. "I took a test. And I'm pregnant." For a few seconds, the world went silent. The sound of cups, people talking, and music faded into the background. All he could hear was his own heartbeat. Pregnant, a child, a family. But instead of joy, fear flooded his chest. His mind raced with the voices of his family and partners. Scandals, headlines, loss of trust, loss of control. She watched his face, hoping for a smile, for excitement. For warmth, he couldn't give her that. He said nothing for too long. Her smile began to fade. "I thought you'd be happy," she whispered. He forced a weak smile and said he needed time to think. He told her it was a lot of information. He told her they would talk about it properly. She nodded, trying to understand. But from that night, he started pulling away. His calls became shorter. His texts became slower. Business suddenly became too busy. Meetings became too important. Problems became too big. She felt it. She felt the distance growing like a wall between them. She tried to be calm. She tried to be patient. She told herself he just needed time, but the loneliness became heavier every day. One night, she stood by the window of her small apartment, holding her phone. Her hand shook while typing a message. "I'm scared. I don't want to go through this alone." The message showed as seen, no reply. Meanwhile, in his world of glass offices and leather chairs, he sat with people who talked about mergers and losses, graphs, and predictions. They told him that personal mistakes could destroy everything. They warned him about responsibility, about public image, about distractions. He started to believe them. He started to believe that love was a weakness, that a baby was a risk, that she was a complication. One evening, when everything inside him felt tight and heavy, he made a decision that would change many lives. He packed a bag quietly. No speeches. No honest explanation. Just a short message left behind. "I need to focus on my future. I'm not ready for this life." Then he walked away. He didn't look back. She found the message late that night. Her knees felt weak. Her heart felt like it had fallen into a deep hole. She sat on the floor, holding the phone, unable to cry at first. The tears came later. Quiet, slow, painful. Her hand rested on her belly. She was no longer just alone. She was carrying a life inside her, and the man who promised forever had disappeared without even saying goodbye outside. The city lights continued to shine as if nothing had happened. Cars moved. People laughed. The world went on. But for her, life had just broken into pieces. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself in a shaky voice, "I will survive." And somewhere far away, a man stared out of another tall window, convincing himself that he had made the right choice. But deep inside, a small, quiet voice kept asking if he had just lost the only thing that ever truly mattered. The first morning after he left felt unreal. She woke up expecting her phone to buzz with a message from him. For a few long seconds, she forgot what had happened the night before. Then her eyes fell on the quiet room, the half-packed bag he had never taken. And the silence hit her all over again. He was gone. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her stomach gently. It was still early. The city outside was waking up, but her world felt frozen in time. At first, she thought about calling him. She even picked up the phone a few times, her finger hovering over his name. But something inside her stopped her every time. A small voice whispered that if someone really loves you, you don't have to beg them to stay, so she didn't call. Life became very different very fast. Morning sickness wasn't just about feeling sick. It was about trying to act normal while your body felt like it belonged to someone else. She still had to work. She still had to smile at people. She still had to stand on buses and walk long roads pretending everything was fine. People noticed changes. They noticed her tired eyes. They noticed her slower steps. Some asked questions. She learned to smile and say, "I'm just tired." Not everyone was kind. There were whispers. There were looks. In small shops and in shared offices, people talked without lowering their voices. They spoke like she couldn't hear. "She's not married, right? Where's the man?" Girls these days. Those words hurt more than she ever admitted. She could have gone back to her parents in the village, but she didn't want pity. She didn't want questions. She didn't want people looking at her like she was broken. She wanted to stand on her own. Money became a problem. Quickly, she had a small job that barely covered rent and food. Doctor visits were expensive. Healthy food was expensive. Even simple things felt heavy on her pocket, so she worked harder. She took extra shifts. She cleaned offices early in the morning before going to her regular job. At night, she did small online work whenever she could keep her eyes open. Some nights, she fell asleep sitting upright, her hand resting over her belly. She started talking to the baby when no one was around. "I don't know how, but we will be okay," she whispered more than once. Meanwhile, his life was moving very fast. New deals, bigger offices, magazine covers. People shook his hand, praised his vision, and called him a genius. The word billion started floating around his world. But something inside him felt off. At night, when the city lights reflected off the glass walls of his apartment, he sometimes thought about her. He wondered if she was okay. He wondered if she hated him. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself that hard choices were part of success. But the quiet was loud. Back in her small apartment, the days became heavier as her body changed. Her back hurt. Her feet swelled. Her emotions shifted like waves. There were nights she cried quietly into her pillow so the neighbors wouldn't hear. There were mornings she woke up with a strange calmness, stroking her belly and imagining tiny fingers and tiny feet. She didn't feel alone all the time. The baby felt like company. One rainy afternoon, her landlord knocked. Rent was late by 3 days. "I'll pay soon," she said, her voice soft but serious. He sighed, annoyed, but gave her one more week. That night, she counted her savings. It wasn't enough for the first time. Fear truly wrapped around her heart. Not fear of him, not fear of love, fear of how to survive. Still, she didn't think of calling him. Pride held her back. Self-respect held her back. She found another job. A small cafe needed someone early in the morning. The pay wasn't much, but it was steady. She started waking up before sunrise, tying her hair back, and walking through empty streets with tired feet and a strong heart. Customers laughed and talked like her life was normal. She poured coffee, she wiped tables, she smiled. Some people were kind. An old woman left a warm scarf on her chair one day and told her, "Keep this, you look cold." A young boy left a chocolate on the counter and said, "For you and the baby." Those small moments gave her strength. The day of birth came quietly. There was no dramatic rush, no movie-like scenes. It's just pain, fear, sweat, and silent prayers. She held on to a nurse's hand so tightly that her fingers went numb. And then, a small cry filled the room. Her child was born. A tiny face, tiny fingers, tiny heartbeat. Tears rolled down her cheek as she held the baby close to her chest. "You're here," she whispered, her voice breaking. In that moment, something shifted inside her. Loneliness weakened. Strength grew. Love filled the empty spaces. The days after were hard. Sleepless nights, endless crying, a body that was still healing, a heart that was trying to adjust to a new life. She didn't have fancy things, no soft lights, no expensive baby beds. But she had warmth. She wrapped the baby in soft blankets. She sang quiet songs her mother used to sing. She rocked back and forth in a small chair that made a soft creaking sound. Outside, people lived fast lives. Inside that small apartment, a quiet, strong world was being built. Years passed slowly. The baby turned into a toddler with curious eyes and messy little steps. Money was still tight. But her mind started changing. She began dreaming again. Not of love, not of him, but of a better future at night. After putting the child to sleep, she started learning new skills from free videos and borrowed books. Her eyes burned with tiredness, but her heart felt alive. She told herself, "This life will not always be like this." One small step became another. Cleaning jobs turned into stable work calf. Work turned into a small online business helping local people. It was slow, painfully slow, but it was moving forward. One night, while watching her child sleep peacefully, she realized something important. She was no longer just surviving. She was becoming stronger. And somewhere, in a large office with glass walls and city views, he sat alone, staring at a screen filled with numbers. Feeling a strange emptiness he did not know how to explain. Because while he had built an empire of money, she had built an empire of strength, and she was just getting started. The years moved quietly but steadily. Life had changed completely for her, yet she refused to let it break her. Every day was a battle. every night a lesson. She learned to balance work, learning, and raising her child with a determination that surprised even herself. What had started as survival slowly became growth. Growth slowly became hope. Her mornings began before the sun touched the city. She would wake, often tired from another sleepless night, and prepare breakfast for her child. Even in her exhaustion, she made sure the food was warm, the smiles genuine, and the words full of encouragement. "You are going to do great things," she said softly, brushing hair from a little forehead. The words were simple, but they planted seeds of confidence in both of them. After breakfast, she would walk to her small office in the local business district. The building wasn't fancy, wasn't even the kind of place people noticed, but she treated it like a palace. She arranged papers, answered emails, spoke to clients with care, and worked late into the night whenever necessary. She had learned that patience and attention to detail were more valuable than money at the beginning. Slowly, little opportunities appeared. A small client here, a kind recommendation there. Nothing huge, but enough to keep moving forward. Her child grew up watching her strength. There were no flashy gifts, no extravagant toys, but every hug, every bedtime story, every gentle word made the child feel loved. "You are important," she would say, "and you can be anything you want." That message became a foundation for the child, who grew curious, kind, and determined. School was never easy. There were challenges, friends who asked questions, and occasional teachers who underestimated the child. But she stood firm, teaching resilience and the value of hard work. Meanwhile, he was building a life of another kind. His businesses flourished. Deals were bigger, offices taller, and names like his carried weight in the media. He traveled across countries, shaking hands with influential people, signing contracts, and attending gala events. From the outside, he had it all: wealth, recognition, power. From the inside, he had a quiet ache. At first he tried to ignore it, drowning it in work, in meetings, in parties. But late at night, when the city lights reflected off his polished floors, memories of her and what he left behind surfaced, uninvited and insistent. He thought of her often, more than he expected. He thought of the smile that never judged him, the laugh that made his chest feel lighter, the small moments in quiet cafes that he had once dismissed. And sometimes he felt a strange curiosity about the child he might have. Was the child like him? Did they have her eyes, her smile, her kindness? But he never acted. The fear of shame, of admitting mistakes, kept him silent. Back in her small office, things were changing. She learned to take small risks. A new client required an idea she had never tried before. She stayed awake for nights, planning, writing, imagining. That one project brought more attention than she expected. Another client, another recommendation. Soon, she was no longer the quiet woman surviving day by day. She was building a reputation quietly, steadily, like a river cutting through rock over time. Her life was far from easy. There were nights when money was tight, nights when the child was sick and she couldn't afford the best doctor, nights when loneliness sat heavy on her shoulders. But she had learned a lesson long ago. Despair doesn't solve problems, only action does. So she acted. She found solutions. She borrowed, hustled, and kept going. Her child grew taller, stronger, and more confident with every passing year. Schoolwork became easier. Friends were made, lessons were learned, and slowly she noticed the seeds she had planted beginning to grow. The child was curious about the world, respectful and compassionate. Every achievement, every little victory was a reminder to her that her sacrifices were not in vain. Meanwhile, he continued to chase more. Towers, companies, contracts. He had everything but peace. He had friends, but few who knew the real him. He had colleagues, but most only admired the money, not the man. Sometimes he would see a child on the street laughing, holding a mother's hand, and feel an ache he didn't fully understand. That ache was different from loneliness, was a longing he could not name. He did not reach out. He could not. Pride and fear were stronger than desire. Years passed, and the woman's small office grew into a larger one. She hired a few employees, people she trusted, people who believed in her vision. She expanded slowly, cautiously, but with confidence. Her business began to attract attention. Local media mentioned her achievements. Her clients trusted her, respected her, and recommended her. She never sought fame, only stability and growth. Yet recognition found her anyway. Through all this, she never spoke of him to her child. She did not want stories of abandonment to shadow the child's sense of worth. She told her child simple truths about life. Sometimes people leave, but you keep moving. Sometimes people fail you, but you keep growing. And sometimes the world will challenge you, but you can always stand taller if you try. These lessons shaped the child, preparing them for life in a way she herself had learned the hard way. One afternoon, she visited a small park with her child. They walked slowly along the paths, watching leaves dance in the wind. Children played nearby. Couples held hands. Laughter echoed softly. Her child ran ahead, shouting and laughing. She smiled, her heart full. In that moment, she realized something. Despite the hardships, despite the absence, despite the pain, she had created a world filled with love, strength, and hope. She had done what he had walked away from. Meanwhile, far away, he faced decisions that no amount of money could solve. Partners demanded loyalty. Employees needed guidance. Competitors sought weakness. And every achievement reminded him of the one loss he had never been able to compensate for. He saw her face in moments he least expected. On magazine covers featuring women in business, in charity events, highlighting mothers. In old photographs stored in the back of his mind, and every time the memory brought a pang of regret. But life does not wait. For her, opportunities began to multiply. Invitations to speak at small conferences, collaborations with other local businesses, and even mentorship offers arrived. She took them cautiously, learning how to navigate larger spaces while keeping her values intact. She had learned the hard way that success without integrity was empty, and she refused to compromise. Slowly, she became known not only as a businesswoman, but as a figure of quiet strength. Someone who could inspire others without loud announcements. Her child, too, began to notice changes. Friends complimented them, teachers encouraged them, and slowly, confidence became a natural part of life. The child asked questions about the past, about life, about struggles. She answered with honesty, but without bitterness. She spoke of challenges as lessons, of hardships as growth, and of courage as the key to moving forward. In doing so, she built not only her own future, but a strong foundation for the next generation. He continued to expand his empire. New cities, new countries, new ventures. But late at night when the rooms were quiet and the city lights reflected off tall buildings, he felt an emptiness that no amount of money could fill. Power had replaced love. Fame had replaced trust. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that no deal, no contract, no title could replace what he had lost years ago. She, on the other hand, found herself reflecting on the journey not with sorrow, but with pride. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every small victory had led her here. She was not the same person who had been abandoned. She was stronger, wiser, and more capable. And most importantly, she had created a life full of meaning, love, and dignity not just for herself, but for her child. The years had changed them both. One had built a world of wealth and recognition, but lacked emotional fulfillment. The other had built a world of strength, love, and respect, growing slowly but steadily into someone unstoppable. Life had moved on, but the echoes of the past remained, waiting for the moment when the paths might cross again. And when that moment came, neither would be the same as before. The large conference hall was buzzing with voices, footsteps, and the soft hum of air conditioning. People moved quickly between booths, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, and discussing deals with confident voices. She walked through the crowd with her child by her side, holding their hand gently as they pointed at the displays with excitement. The past years had been a journey of struggle, determination, and quiet victories. And today, she walked taller, steadier, and calmer than ever before. Her company had grown enough to participate in this international business event. Invitations had arrived because of her reputation, and she had accepted carefully, knowing that this was not only a professional opportunity, but also a chance to see how far she had come. She had prepared presentations, rehearsed speeches, and packed carefully chosen outfits that projected confidence without extravagance. She was here to show that hard work, integrity, persistence could create results even against the odds. Her child walked beside her, now old enough to understand more than ever. Their curiosity was bright, their questions constant. But they were also proud to see their mother in a place full of grown-up ambitions. They didn't know all the struggles she had faced in the past, but they could see the strength in her posture, the calm in her smile, and the quiet confidence in her words. These things spoke louder than stories ever could. Somewhere across the hall, was watching the crowd with a similar focus, but for very different reasons. He had been invited as a keynote speaker, a figure of immense success. People recognized him, clapped for him, praised him. Every handshake, every photograph, every conversation reminded him of the life he had built, the empire he had created. But tonight it felt different. There was a pull he could not explain, a sense of expectation he could not ignore. He felt a strange restlessness, as if the world outside these walls could wait. But something inside demanded attention. Their paths crossed almost by accident. She had paused to let her child look at a display, and he had turned a corner at the same time. When their eyes met, the world seemed to quiet around them. For a long moment, neither spoke. He was the first to notice how much she had changed. Her posture was straighter, her gaze confident, her expression calm. The woman he had left behind, frightened and alone, was gone. In her place stood someone who had endured, who had grown, and who now commanded respect effortlessly. She recognized him immediately, though part of her had tried not to. Memories rushed back: the ring, the cafe, the long walks, the words left unsaid, the painful message that had shattered her world. For a second, anger flared, followed by hurt, and then a strange mixture of curiosity and calm. She had no intention of running or hiding. He had made his choices, and she had made hers. She would not let his presence unbalance the life she had built. He stepped closer, almost instinctively. He had rehearsed what he might say for years in his mind, but now words seemed inadequate. "It's been a long time," he said, voice careful, controlled, but softer than usual. He looked at her and then at the child, who clung lightly to her hand, curiosity shining in their eyes. You look amazing," he added, though it sounded hollow even to him. Words could not capture the years lost, the pain endured, or the life that had moved forward without him. She smiled politely, a gesture that was warm yet measured. "Thank you," she said. "You've done well yourself." Her tone was neutral, but her eyes held a depth of experience that spoke of years of struggle, growth, and resilience. She did not move closer. She did not offer him comfort. She had learned that her strength came from independence. From surviving and thriving on her own. He noticed the child immediately. There was a resemblance he could not ignore: small features, curious eyes, a smile that carried a spark he had only seen in himself. Fear, guilt, and disbelief swept through him all at once. He wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, but he did not. His pride, his fear of inadequacy, and his awareness of the years lost kept him frozen. The child looked at him with innocence, unaware of the history swirling around them. "Hello," they said softly, a mixture of curiosity and politeness. Her mother nodded encouragement. The child had grown in a world of love, not bitterness, and that was evident in every word, every gesture. He could only nod in return, unsure how to respond. They walked together through the hall, exchanging small talk with other attendees. He noticed how naturally she carried herself, how effortlessly she engaged with people, and how she commanded attention without demanding it. Every word, every gesture reflected years of struggle turned into quiet confidence. And as much as he wanted to hide it, he felt the weight of his own choices pressing down on him at one point. They paused near a display about business ethics and leadership. She spoke passionately, explaining her vision and strategies, her eyes bright, her hands animated. He listened, recognizing talent, intelligence, and determination that he had once dismissed, never imagining it could flourish so beautifully. He realized that the years had not diminished her, they had elevated her. She had not just survived, she had grown into someone remarkable. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but nothing came out. He remembered every moment of fear, every excuse, every reason he had given himself for leaving. And now, standing here, he saw clearly that those reasons had cost him more than he had imagined. Wealth, power, and fame had not replaced the life he abandoned. The child, the family, the love, those were irreplaceable. They moved through the event, occasionally exchanging polite words with others, yet beneath the surface, a tension simmered. She was not angry, not bitter, just calm and confident. He, on the other hand, felt a storm inside, a mixture of admiration, regret, and longing. He saw what he had lost, and it was impossible to ignore. After the event, they stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights reflected on wet streets, casting a glow that seemed almost magical. She took a deep breath, feeling the life she had built around her, the strength she had earned. He stood nearby, silent, realizing that the woman he once knew was now untouchable in ways he could never have imagined. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I've worked hard for this life. I didn't need anyone to stay with me to make it happen." Her eyes met his, unwavering. "And I raised my child to be strong, independent, and kind. That's the most important thing I have." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of years filled with challenges, victories, and resilience. He swallowed, unsure how to respond. He wanted to reach out, to say something meaningful, but he knew it would not undo the past. He had left. He had abandoned. And now, he was confronted not with anger, but with proof that life had gone on without him and thrived. The child tugged gently at her hand, breaking the moment. "Mom, look at that," they said, pointing to a distant building. She smiled, squeezing their hand. He watched, feeling a mix of awe and heartbreak. The life they shared, the bond they had built, the love they had nurtured, none of it was his to touch. As the evening ended and they prepared to leave, he felt a strange emptiness. He had come to the event expecting recognition, networking, and opportunities. Instead, he found something he could never regain, the reality of what he had lost. And she walked beside her child, calm, proud, and untouchable, leaving him to face the quiet truth. For the first time in years, he realized that success without love, without connection, was incomplete, and that the woman he had left behind was no longer the person he had once known. She was stronger, wiser, and far beyond the reach of regret. And the child, innocent yet full of life, reminded him that the past could not be rewritten. No matter how much he wanted it to be, she stood at the edge of the park, the city lights glowing softly around her, and watched her child run ahead, laughing and calling out to friends. The evening air carried the smell of fresh rain, and the quiet hum of life surrounded her. She felt at peace in a way she had never thought possible years ago, when life had seemed heavy, unfair, and impossible. The journey from those dark days to this moment had not been easy, but it had been hers entirely. Every step, every tear, every small victory had shaped the life she now lived. The man stood across the street, hidden partially by a tree, unsure whether to approach or stay back. He had followed her at the event, drawn by something he could not name, now watched quietly as she interacted naturally with the world. He saw the strength in her posture, the warmth in her smile, the ease with which she moved through life. He could see clearly, finally, that the woman he had left behind was no longer someone who needed him, no longer someone whose life could be disrupted by his presence. She was complete, whole, and radiant. He thought back to the nights he had spent alone in his luxury apartment, staring at the city's skyline, wondering why success felt empty. He had achieved everything he had dreamed of in terms of wealth and power, yet each achievement had left a hollow echo in his chest. There had been nights when he longed to hear her voice, to see her smile, to feel the warmth he had abandoned. And now, after years, he realized the truth he had tried to ignore. The real loss was not wealth, not status, not recognition. The real loss was her, the love, the connection, the life they could have had together. She noticed him for the first time. It was subtle, almost instinctive. She saw a familiar face, older, more serious, and yet there was something she recognized immediately. Her heartbeat did not quicken with fear or hope. It simply acknowledged what was in front of her. She had lived long enough, struggled long enough, and learned enough to know that he was no longer a part of her life unless she chose to allow it. She chose calm. She chose composure. He stepped closer, cautiously, aware that years of absence could not be undone by a single greeting. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, voice low, controlled, but carrying a tremor of vulnerability he had not felt in years. He glanced at the child, who now stood close to her, curious about the stranger. You've done amazing things," he added, trying to find words that could express his respect, admiration, and regret all at once. But he knew words would fall short. She smiled gently, with no need to defend herself, no need to explain her life. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've worked hard. Everything I have now is because I didn't wait for anyone to make it happen for me." Her eyes held quiet power. She did not speak with anger, though the memories of betrayal lingered silently in her mind. She simply spoke truth. She had lived, she had grown, she had conquered. And she had done it on her own. The child, innocent and perceptive, looked up at him with wide eyes. Are you someone important?" they asked, tilting their head curiously. She bent slightly, smiling. "He's someone from the past," she said simply, leaving the details unsaid. The child nodded, satisfied with the answer, returning their attention to the playground. The simplicity of the moment struck him deeply. Years of absence, and yet here he was. Confronted with the life that had grown without him, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had abandoned them when they needed him most, and no apology could erase that. Every day he had spent away, every opportunity to be part of their lives, had been lost. He had chased wealth and status, but they could never replace the love, care, and strength she had built in his absence. For the first time, he understood that true success was not measured by money or power, but by the people whose lives you nurture, whose hearts you touch, whose trust you keep. She sensed the conflict in him, though she did not let it sway her. She had long ago accepted that people leave and that life must continue regardless of absence. She had raised her child with love, patience, and care. She had built a career, a reputation, and a life that could not be shaken by someone who had once abandoned her. Her past with him was a shadow now, a reminder of resilience, not sorrow. He took a careful step forward. I've made mistakes," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I left when I shouldn't have. He stopped. Words failed him. He realized that confession, explanation, or apology could not alter the years of absence, could not undo the hardships they had endured, and could not create the bond that had been broken. All he could do was acknowledge it, feel it, and respect the lives they had built without him. She listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She did not judge. Her silence carried the weight of someone who had experienced life fully and had no need for validation from anyone. She had loved, lost, endured, and grown. And now she had peace. That peace was stronger than his words, stronger than his wealth, stronger than anything he had amassed in the years apart. He looked at her child again. The resemblance was undeniable, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine what life could have been. But imagination was all it could be. He had no right to step into their lives now, no claim, no authority, no entitlement. And yet the sight stirred something inside him. He could not suppress the longing. A regret, a wish to make amends, even if only in spirit. She finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "You don't need to fix anything. We're doing well. We've built a life that is full and happy. That's all that matters." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of experience, of endurance, of love transformed into strength. She was telling him without accusation or anger that she no longer needed his presence to validate her existence. She had created meaning, purpose, and joy on her own. He nodded, humbled, silent. He understood fully that his past actions had consequences he could not escape. He realized that true regret is not about wanting to return, but about witnessing what could have been and knowing it is lost forever. She had moved forward, flourished, and thrived, and in doing so, she had become untouchable to the mistakes he had once made. The evening deepened, and the city lights reflected softly on wet streets from the rain earlier. They walked together briefly, side by side, but not intertwined. Distance remained between them, physical and emotional, but it was no longer heavy with anger. It was simply the space life had created. He realized that some losses are permanent, that some mistakes cannot be corrected, and that sometimes the greatest respect is allowing people to live without interference. She watched her child laugh with friends, free and confident. Every small gesture, every happy moment, was a testament to the life she had built. She had faced the hardest battles: loneliness, fear, financial struggles, doubt, and she had emerged victorious. Not through luck, not through reliance on anyone, but through determination, love, and courage. He finally spoke again, voice low and honest. "You've become remarkable. I am sorry for leaving." There was no expectation of forgiveness, no hope of reconciliation. It was simply acknowledgement, truth spoken aloud. She nodded slightly, accepting the words without needing them to change her life. Her life was hers. Her child's life was theirs. His presence did not alter that. The child tugged at her hand, and she bent down, smiling. "Come on, let's go," she said, and they walked away, leaving him standing on the sidewalk. He watched as they moved, laughing, talking, alive in a way he could never take away. And in that moment, he understood something profound. The woman he had abandoned was not a victim. She was a survivor, a leader, a mother, and a force of life. And the life she had built was complete, strong, and unshakable. He turned away slowly, carrying a mixture of admiration, sorrow, and understanding. He had wealth, power, and recognition. But what he saw tonight was something far greater. A woman who had transformed pain into strength, absence into resilience, and abandonment into a life of meaning. He realized that some things, no matter how much you try to reclaim them, are beyond reach once they have grown fully, independently and beautifully. And she walked on, into the city lights, with her child beside her, calm, proud, an unstoppable life built not on dependence or luck, but on courage, love, and unwavering determination. Years passed quietly, yet they carried the weight of lessons learned, battles fought, and victories quietly won. She had moved far beyond the small apartment where she had struggled to survive, building a home that reflected not just comfort but pride. Her child, now older, was growing into a thoughtful, kind, and confident young person. The small hands she had once held in her own were now capable of small acts of independence, but the bond between them remained unshakable. Life had shifted from survival to growth, from fear to courage, and from quiet resilience to quiet success. Her mornings began before the city fully woke. She would walk quietly through the corridors of her office, checking emails, reviewing reports, and preparing for the day ahead. Meetings had replaced cleaning jobs, clients had replaced uncertain tasks, and her calendar now carried names and numbers that once would have seemed unreachable. Yet she remained grounded. She never forgot the nights when she had stayed awake with a crying baby, when food had been scarce, and when fear had wrapped around her chest. Those memories reminded her of the value of persistence, of patience, and of careful planning. Her child walked to school with a backpack slung over one shoulder, chatting excitedly about lessons, friends, and dreams. She watched, smiling, feeling a swell of pride she had learned to cherish. Every school project, every small accomplishment, was a reflection of the foundation she had built for them, an environment where love, support, and encouragement outweighed wealth and luxury. Friends and neighbors often commented on how grounded and responsible the child seemed, and she quietly nodded, aware that these traits had been nurtured through consistency, example, and love. Meanwhile, the man who had left years ago had continued on his path of wealth and recognition. Towers, companies, contracts, he had it all. From the outside, his life appeared perfect. From the inside, it felt increasingly hollow. Luxury could not fill the gaps left by absence. Success could not replace emotional connection, and accolades could not substitute for the love he had walked away from. He had tried to convince himself that power and fame mattered more, that independence was preferable, and that avoiding responsibility was acceptable. But the quiet nights, the empty apartments, and the fleeting moments of reflection had revealed the truth he had tried to ignore for years. Some losses are permanent, and some choices cannot be undone. She had reached a point in her career where she was no longer just a participant in business. She was a leader, respected by peers and clients alike. She mentored young women who faced challenges similar to those she had once faced. She spoke at conferences, shared her experiences, and encouraged others to trust in their own strength. Every time she addressed a group, she remembered the early mornings, the endless work, and the small victories that had brought her here. Her voice, calm and confident, carried authority not because of wealth or status, but because of lived experience. One afternoon, she walked into her office to find a small envelope on her desk. It had no name, no return address. Inside was a note written in careful handwriting. "I see what you have become. You are stronger than I ever imagined. I am sorry for everything." Her hands trembled slightly, but she did not allow fear or anger to take hold. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was him. For a moment, old memories flickered pain, longing, confusion, but she reminded herself of the years she had survived without him. She had built a life of her own choosing. She had no need to revisit the past unless she wanted to. She placed the note carefully in a drawer. A silent acknowledgement of what once was and what no longer required action. Her child noticed the envelope. Curious as children are, but she smiled and said simply, "Sometimes people realize things too late. What matters is what we do every day to build our lives." The child nodded, understanding more than she expected. The lesson was clear. Life's value was not measured by who had left or who had returned, but by the love, effort, and resilience one invested in the present. The business continued to grow. She expanded into new markets, collaborated with trusted partners, and took calculated risks. Every decision was made with care, balancing ambition with ethics, growth with integrity, and success with compassion. Her reputation grew not through flashy announcements or self-promotion, but through consistent performance and unwavering dedication. People admired her not just for her skills, but for the person she had become, a woman who had faced immense challenges and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Meanwhile, he attended gala events, signed deals, and gave interviews. Yet a shadow lingered over his achievements. The realization that his success had come at the cost of what truly mattered began to weigh more heavily each year. He saw her name occasionally in articles, noted her accomplishments, and could not help but feel a mix of pride, regret, and a silent longing. She had done what he could, not turned adversity into opportunity, absence into strength, and heartbreak into growth. One weekend, she took her child to a community park, a quiet place with trees, benches, and a small playground. They walked slowly, observing children at play, families interacting, and the simple rhythm of life around them. Her child ran ahead, laughing, while she followed at a measured pace, enjoying the peace and observing the world. She reflected on the years behind her, from the first days of fear and struggle to the quiet victories of growth and independence. Every challenge had taught her something valuable. Every obstacle had shaped her resilience, and every lonely night had reinforced her determination. As they sat on a bench, she noticed him approaching from the other side of the park. He moved cautiously, unsure if she would acknowledge him. The years had changed them both. He no longer carried the confident arrogance of youth. She no longer carried the vulnerability of abandonment. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, words were unnecessary. The years of experience, growth, and reflection were written clearly in their expressions. He stopped a few steps away, lowering his gaze respectfully. I've watched from afar, he said quietly. I see what you've built, the life you've created. I'm proud in a way I can't explain. His voice was sincere, free of expectation, and aware of the gap the years had created. She nodded, accepting his words as they were, recognition without intrusion, acknowledgement without demand. Her child approached, curiosity shining in their eyes. Who is he? They asked softly. She smiled gently. Someone from the past, she replied simply, leaving the details minimal. What matters is what we do every day. Child nodded, returning to play. The simplicity of the moment highlighted the strength she had nurtured in them, a life lived fully. With love and independence at its core, he realized then that no apology could change the years lost, and no presence could alter the life she had built. The woman he had once abandoned was no longer defined by his actions. She was defined by her own choices, resilience, and love. And the life around her, especially the child she had raised, reflected the completeness and strength that he could never disrupt. For the first time, he truly understood the cost of leaving. He had wealth, recognition, and influence. But he lacked the fulfillment that came from enduring and creating a life of purpose. She, in contrast, had everything that mattered: love, respect, independence, and a future she had shaped with her own hands. The difference was undeniable, and it left him humbled, reflective, and silent. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues, they parted ways in the park. He walked slowly in one direction, carrying the weight of realization and regret. She walked with her child in the other, calm, assured, and unshaken. The years had taught her that life is measured not by who stays or leaves, but by the strength to continue, the courage to build, and the love to nurture. And as she disappeared into the evening light, hand in hand with her child, he understood finally and completely that the woman he had left behind was no longer someone he could change, no longer someone he could claim, and no longer someone whose life he could influence. She had become a testament to resilience, a living example of how adversity can be transformed into strength, and a reminder that some losses, no matter how painful, create the space for remarkable growth. Her life continued forward, full of challenges, successes, love, and learning. She had created a world that was hers entirely, shaped by determination, courage, and quiet strength. And in that world, she stood untouchable, unstoppable, and undeniably free.